Imagine half of your population not having any say on how their country is run. Could you? Less than 100 years ago, this was reality for American women. The Declaration of Independence proclaimed, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that amongst these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." But when our founding fathers wrote the building blocks of our nation, surely they meant all people are equal, not just men, and therefore should have a say in how their country is run. For 144 years, American women of all races and statuses were denied voting rights and fought a long, hard battle to achieve suffrage. A little history for you. From the year of 1776 till 1787, only white men who owned property could vote. Then in the 1820s and 30s, most all white men could vote, no matter their status. Then in 1870 came the 15th Amendment, which allowed black men to vote and seemed great. But shortly in some states, poll taxes and literacy tests were imposed, which turned away most black men and poor white men. And not to mention, women still couldn't vote. The fight for equal rights began when all men received equal voting rights, and women started to resist the cult of true womanhood, which was the stereotype of a good, religious woman, dedicated wife, nurturing mother, and housekeeper. This new attitude especially picked up in the 1850s, but the Civil War started and all thoughts of women's suffrage were forgotten, even though Abraham Lincoln was for the idea. Many women banded together to pass an amendment for women's suffrage and tried to please the public into voting for the movement. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony used the 15th Amendment to their advantage and sided with the racist white Southerners, saying women's votes could level out African American votes. When this didn't succeed, they founded the National Women's Suffrage Association in 1869. Another group of women formed the American Women's Suffrage Association, and both groups merged in 1890 to form the National American Women's Suffrage Association, with Elizabeth Cady Stanton as the president. In the early 1900s, women's suffrage was picking up speed, and more states were legalizing this new right. While women had been able to vote in the western states such as Wyoming, Utah, and Idaho for years, states under the old Mason-Dixon line and Pennsylvania still had not allowed this right. The new president of the National American Women's Suffrage Association, Carrie Chapman Catt, devised a plan to achieve suffrage for all in 1910. The winning plan, as she called it, would motivate all suffrage groups in the country and made great advancements until they were slowed down by World War I. Just like the Civil War, World War I made everyone forget about women's voting rights. President Woodrow Wilson argued that he wasn't against women voting, but war efforts were requiring his whole attention. During this time, many campaigns and businesses supported women's suffrage, hoping that the new women voters would be to their advantage. For example, temperance advocates, people against the consumption of alcohol, thought that if women had the right to vote, they would sway the cause against alcohol and win the long argument. Others wanted women to vote so that whites would be superior racially in votes. The protests continued, and women of all races, statuses, and backgrounds attended. They protested peacefully in front of the White House and advertised their thoughts on signs. They used many tactics such as hunger strikes and silent vigils, and many were fined for this, but wouldn't pay up, as they believed what they did wasn't wrong, and they were thrown in jail. The women in prison experienced awful conditions and became interested in the well-being of inmates and prison reform. First Wyoming in 1890, then later Colorado, Utah, Idaho, Washington State, California, Oregon, Kansas, and many others all approved women's voting rights. Then finally, after all of the struggles in 1920, the 19th Amendment was passed and women could finally vote. In the grand scheme of voting in the world, women in America didn't have it that badly. Women in the United Arab Emirates were only allowed to vote in 2006. In Bahrain, women gained their vote in 2002, and in Saudi Arabia, 2015 will be the first year women can vote. It is hard to believe that women haven't been able to vote as long as men have, and we will never forget those women who made voting possible for everyone.
Created using Powtoon.